Welcome to mrhorrortale, where we tell scary stories that really happened. To ensure you don't miss out on other horror contents, remember to subscribe to the channel and activate the notification bell. What is the first thing we think of when Christmas comes? You can think of different things, but everyone has one figure in common: Santa Claus. That happy man with a huge white beard who comes to leave presents for all the children. But like all famous people, Santa Claus has many imitators. Some may be sick people, others may be demons, and some evil incarnate. In these stories, we will see how a teenager who goes shopping, a policeman, and a filmmaker face these Santa Claus, although some of these protagonists have a worse fate than the others. Story 1. Christmas. This used to be one of my favorite holidays of the year. Presents, children, happiness, everything was fantastic. But as you can imagine, this is not a happy story, and my love for Christmas disappeared a few days before the holidays. That day I could have lost my life, and my killer would have been someone disguised as Santa Claus. It used to be a day like any other day when I decided to go to the mall to do some Christmas shopping. I needed to buy a few things to decorate our tree, and I thought it would be quick. The mall was full of people, as it usually is on these dates. Kids running around and parents loaded with bags with gifts. When it all started, I was just looking at cell phones in the store when a face caught my attention. A person disguised as Santa Claus stood in the distance, staring at me. I tried to ignore him, thinking maybe it was just a coincidence. But every time I stopped, so did the Santa. The strange figure didn't seem to hide his presence. It was as if he wanted me to see him. I walked into a clothing store and started looking at some shirts, but when I looked up at the mirror, I saw the figure again, this time reflected behind me. Who was this person, and why was he chasing me? I decided to head to mall security and explain the situation, but strangely, there was no one there. I started to get scared. I thought about leaving the place, but what if he followed me? What if he ended up coming to my house and harassing my family? I had to be sure that he wasn't following me anymore. I took a break in the food court area. I sat at a table in a corner, trying to hide in the crowd. I ordered a coffee and waited, watching the people go by. I had to be calm. The more scared I got, the more mistakes I would make. At best, maybe it was a teenager disguising as Santa just to make me have an uncomfortable moment, but I couldn't risk it being something worse. I was in a public place, sitting quietly. This psycho wouldn't dare do anything to me here. I wanted to get the phone out to let my family know that it would take a little longer. When I looked up from my cup, Santa was standing in front of me. His face was hidden under a hood, but I could feel his penetrating gaze. He didn't say a word, just stood there, staring at me. My hands were shaking. Something about his presence paralyzed me, as if my body instinctively knew that I was in a big danger. The silence became unbearable, and my gaze met his through the mask. A shiver ran down my spine. Suddenly, Santa slowly raised a finger and placed it over his lips in a silent gesture. A clear warning that I was not to make noise or draw attention to myself. My thoughts became a whirlwind of panic. What did this silent psychopath want? Why was he pursuing me with such sick determination? I decided to act shrewdly, and with trembling hands, discreetly put the phone away without taking the picture. Perhaps for now, it was better not to provoke someone so unpredictable. Despite paying attention to him, I stood up and began to walk backwards slowly, without losing sight of him at any moment. The figure continued to follow me, getting closer and closer. I slowly made my way towards a security guard. I knew there was always one near the bathroom. Meanwhile, the psychopath simply followed me slowly, always gaining a few centimeters of distance. I noticed that the man's pace was quickening, and at that moment I realized that I wasn't going to make it to the cop in time. I decided to take a chance and run desperately, screaming for help. It was the worst thing I could do. The man got within inches of me in a matter of seconds. The guard was a few meters away. He had already seen me, but neither he nor I was prepared for what was about to happen. Ignoring the fact that we were in the middle of the crowd, the psychopath lunged at me, and in one leap knocked me to the ground. Once on the ground, Santa used his fingers to violently squeeze my eyes. I can't describe to you the pain I felt at that moment. I felt like his fingers were going to pierce my head and reach my brain. The man's strength was enormous, and it seemed that he was not going to stop until he killed me. Suddenly, the security guard hit the man and pushed him away a few inches, but that didn't work for long. Filled with rage, the psychopath pushed the guard away in seconds. His hood had been revealed to show a deformed and hideous face. His eyes were still on me, and that look alone was enough to make anyone lose their will to fight him. "I too old you not to make any noise. You will be going to the NGT we last. You will get coal for securistanes." At this war cry, the man started running again, catching up to me once more. The people who were watching everything tried to stop him, but the psychopath looked like a truck that was impossible to stop. Horrified, my feet gave out and I fell to the ground, at the mercy of the monster that was about to catch up with me once again. I thought it was all over, but before he jumped to attack me, the man ran out of energy. 6 people managed to stop him and throw him to the ground. From there, he was still staring at me, screaming in desperation, trying to free himself to kill me. The man did not calm down until the police arrived a few minutes later. Even after several minutes, he had lost neither the energy nor the will to attack me. I just stood there, confused. I didn't understand why this man was so intent on attacking me, nor did I understand how he went from carefully following me to becoming a wild animal desperate to attack me. A few days later, the police called me to clarify everything that had happened and to reassure me that I was safe. The man had escaped from a psychiatric hospital several days ago. Since his escape, he had been hiding in the mall overnight, hiding in the food section of the supermarket. The psycho had stolen a Santa Claus costume from one of the mall employees. He simply wanted to be Santa Claus, and I was unlucky enough to be in the wrong place at the wrong time, as he randomly picked me to see if I would behave. I never went back to the mall. From that day on, when I see someone disguised as a Santa, I am terrified. At Christmas, there are Santas everywhere, and as I found out that day, you never know if one of them is watching you. Story 2. Hey, my name is Robbie, and I'm a huge horror movie fan. When I say I'm a horror fan, I don't just mean the latest movies, like The Conjuring or Annabelle. No, I really am a living encyclopedia of horror movies. Like any big horror fan, I'm actually bored of all this new movies. I've lost count of the number of times I've seen different movies be completely the same. The same cliches, the same scares, the same formula. I've come to believe that horror movies were not making it for me anymore. People say that I'm very critical of horror movies, and that I even seem somewhat obsessed with watching them. And they might be right. The problem was when my obsession perhaps went too far, and knowing what I was in for, I opened a door that should never have been opened. That night I allowed something evil and cruel to take advantage of my curiosity, and from what I saw that night, I could have suffered a fate far worse than death. It all started on Christmas afternoon. At that time, I was still living with my parents, who were going to celebrate at my aunt and uncle's house. I decided to stay in and watch some Christmas special. It's not that I'm an antisocial person, or that I don't like Christmas. I was just a little sick, and since my elderly relatives were going to be there, I didn't want to infect anyone with anything, and just in case I decided to stay home. I was changing the channel on the TV, thinking about what to watch, when suddenly I received an email on my cell phone. The email was rather strange. It was composed of random letters and a domain I didn't know. The email had written, "As requested, here is the original cut of Krampus." Underneath, there was a link. I know a little bit about computers, and I knew that opening an unknown link from a strange email would be a bad idea. but I was very curious. And to be honest, I asked them to send me the link. A few days ago, I was on Reddit, and a user was saying that he had the original cut of the movie Krampus. To be honest, the original movie didn't hold my attention. It wasn't very good, but it wasn't very bad either. What did surprise me was to learn from this Reddit that the original version of the movie was said to be haunted, and brought various misfortunes to those who worked on its production. And you know what? One of the guys from production said that he had the original film. I was one of the few people who asked him for it, and to tell you the truth, I didn't think he was going to send it to me. Almost hypnotized, I opened the link praying that my computer would not be invaded by a virus, but to my surprise, nothing of the sort happened. The link took me to a movie ready to play, and when I did, I sat down and watched as Krampus began. I transferred from the computer to the television and plopped down on my couch to watch it. At first, the movie was exactly the same as the original. The whole movie went normally until, in the middle of the movie, something strange started to happen. I started to feel a strange vibe in the house, as if the sound of the demon's noise were spreading and echoing throughout the dining room of my own house. Suddenly, the screen flickered and turned off. I was left in total darkness, all alone. I tried to turn on the lights, but they didn't work. My breathing became rapid and shallow as I fought the growing sense of panic. Then a dim light illuminated the dining room. I looked up at the TV screen, which came back on by itself. But something was wrong. The movie continued, but it was impossible. The computer was off, and what I saw on the TV was supposed to be broadcasting from there. Out of absolute nowhere, a soft grunt echoed in the room, a grunt that didn't come from the movie. This laughter was just like the sounds I heard before, only louder. At that moment, I realized that the sounds from before were not coming from the computer, they were coming from my house. The atmosphere became denser as if the air itself was charged with oppressive energy. My muscles tensed, and I felt a pressure in my chest, as if something invisible was squeezing me. The light on the screen flickered again, and this time, a blurred figure appeared behind my own reflection. It was coming from Christmas tree, his face and body. It was like Santa Claus. It was like the Santa Claus doll we had decorating the tree, only now it was human size. But there was something else about this doll, his body, his build, his shape. This was not just any Santa Claus. This being was just like Krampus. I tried to get up and run, but my body did not respond. I was paralyzed, watching helplessly as the horrifying figure slowly approached. I felt an icy breath on my neck, and my skin crawled. The malevolent laughter echoed in my ears, drowning out any other sound. At that moment, the temperature in the room dropped sharply. I could see my own breath in the air, forming small white clouds. Its eyes glowed with a demonic light, and its smile was twisted and malicious. I didn't know what to do. I thought this was the end. From the dining room, still paralyzed in my seat, I could hear the doors opening violently throughout the house. From the kitchen, I could hear the dishes fall from the cupboard, and the glass of the windows began to crack and even break. The nightmare Santa Claus was enjoying my fear. It was as if it knew that it could take my time with me, that I could do nothing to run away or to defend myself. Once I had Krampus next to me, he slowly approached me and whispered something in my ear. As soon as he finished speaking, my body froze and I started to cry. I wanted to vomit so badly, but I held it in and stayed on the floor in the fetal position. You wonder what he said in my ear, don't you? To be honest, I have no idea what he said. It's as if whatever he said was lost from my memory. As soon as I finished uttering the last letter, I lay on the floor crying for a while longer. Seconds, minutes, hours passed. The cold of the room was gone, and I was alone. I don't know what had happened with the demon. I just lay on the floor, confused, not aware of where I was or what was happening. Soon after, my parents arrived and made me come to my senses. I can't remember much of that situation, but they put it down to me being sick, even though they never saw any fever ever do to anyone what it did to me that day. I can imagine what you are thinking. Am I possessed? The answer is no. In the few months that have passed, nothing has happened to me that would lead me to believe such a thing. What I can confirm is that since that day, misfortune has followed me. I was fired from my job, and I never got a job again. I basically live on my parents. I had several traffic accidents, some more complicated than others, and many of my family members died. Any person, be it a girlfriend or a friend who tries to get into my life, starts to go through the same thing I did, so they end up distancing themselves from me. Even though I live with my parents, since that day I have felt alone, scared, and depressed. It's as if my life is being consumed with each passing second. I really don't know what I saw that day, but I feel that, just like the actors and people who worked on Krampus, I am now cursed, and that evil Santa will come to end what he started. Sooner or later, I know he will. Story 3. Hey guys, my name is Adam. I'm a police officer, but I'm currently on vacation because what I went through a few days ago was so traumatic, so horrible, that I'm still surprised I haven't left this job for good and moved on to something else. You see, I was always a very fearful person. I know, it's ridiculous for me to be a cop with a personality like that, but I wanted to be a better person. I wanted to overcome my fears and help society. Nothing and no one was going to tell me that I couldn't do it. Even though I was still a little scared at the beginning, my training gave me more confidence, and little by little I managed to overcome my fears and become the cop I wanted to become. But there would be a day when my badge, my training, and my courage would come to nothing. And the worst happened to me in the place where I least expected it. That day I had already returned to the police station. We had arrested a man, a strange man. When we were called, the victim was terrified. He told us that this man was a psychopath, a cruel, violent, bloodthirsty monster. When we arrived at the scene, we met the victim and the criminal. The man was disguised as Santa Claus. In July, he was more than 2 meters tall. He was standing, looking at us with indifference, but with a big smile. He didn't look dangerous, but when we saw the victim, we took him seriously. She was unharmed, but her eyes were wide open in shock. She did not react to our presence, just stared at the Santa as if he were the devil himself. We arrested the man and took him to the police station. I must admit that this was the smoothest ride we had ever had. Not only did he not resist at all, but he also silently obeyed everything we told him. We didn't understand what was going on, but this Santa gave me and my partner a very bad vibe. We just wanted to get rid of him as soon as possible. When we arrived at the station, I was given the order to lock him in one of the temporary cells. He would probably be there for about 24 hours unless the victim gave us a good reason to do it for longer, but I saw that as unlikely, since when we left, she only asked that we take him as far away from her as possible. I was taking the man to his cell, but at that moment, the worst thing that could happen happened. Shortly before it had started to rain violently, and because of a thunderclap, the lights in the whole station, in the whole block, were cut off. In that moment of confusion, I felt someone hit me with his body, and I fell to the ground. The strange Santa was no longer with me. I could hear his footsteps running in the station, but they were not heading towards the office, but inside the station. I thought about running and telling my colleagues, but I couldn't take that risk. The reason the criminal escaped was because I was distracted. A cop can't make those mistakes. I had to fix it without anyone knowing. In the dark, I pulled out my gun and followed him to the office. This was definitely not my lucky day, as these offices were under renovation. I entered the empty office ready to shoot, wondering where this man was hiding. A part of me was terrified. I was locked in a dark office with a man of a very strange nature, a man who traumatized a person to the point of not wanting to report him and just want him out of the house. But I could not allow myself to be afraid. I was the cop, the person trained to defend himself. The person with a gun, and I was definitely not the one running away in handcuffs with an uncomfortable and cumbersome Santa Claus costume. I continued to investigate with my gun in hand, while I listened to the voices of the other cops gathering at the entrance or leaving the place to see if there was light outside. Little by little, I realized that I was becoming more and more alone, since no one would have any reason to stay in the dark or look for someone. Suddenly, I began to hear him humming Christmas carols and whistling as he walked. His footsteps were slow and intense, but what terrified me most about them was that they were determined footsteps. They were not the footsteps of a person trying to escape or hide. At that moment, I realized that this person did not go into the office to hide from me, but rather to trap me. By humming those Christmas songs, he was trying to tell me one thing very clearly. He wasn't hiding from me. He was looking for me. I was the victim. I was the one who was supposed to be scared, not him. The slow steps picked up speed. The man was running towards me, zigzagging. After a warning, I fired twice, and the footsteps stopped. Had I hit him? As soon as I took a step to investigate in the darkness, someone rushed violently toward me. The man used his handcuffed arms to embrace me and squeeze me in his arms. My weapon fell to the ground from the force he applied to me, and in one swift movement, he reached behind me and choked me even tighter. I tried to resist, but it was no use. The strength of this person was enormous, and to make it even worse, he seemed to be trained or to know martial arts, because I could not free myself. The man slowly stiffened his arms, which made me understand that he was not even using all his strength. When I least expected it, when I was about to faint, the man gave a huge scream in my ear that stunned me. Ho, ho, ho. Merry Christmas. After that, I lost all my courage. I cried as loud as I could in a dry scream that came out like a breath. The door behind us opened, and from one second to the next, many flashlights were shining on the man, who didn't seem to give up and pressed even harder. The cops were about to shoot him, but out of nowhere, the light came back on. At this, the man looked up and simply let go of me, crouching down and taking a passive stance again. The cops arrested him, and I fell to the ground crying. The nightmare was over. After that, the man was arrested for assaulting an officer, and I began my enforced vacation. While I was at home, I learned that the man began receiving several visits from a woman who seemed to treat him with great confidence and excitement. This woman was the same woman who had reported the man, whom we found in her home in a panic. We found out that this woman was not related to the psychopath, and shortly after, we learned that she was writing a book about him. There are things I can't explain, like the power outage or why the man was disguised as a Santa in July, and why did he calm down when he saw lights. But a part of me felt that all this was planned, and that the woman might not be the victim we thought she was. No investigation was ever done on this, so I feel I will never get those answers. All I know is that when Christmas really comes in a few months, I will not allow anyone in my house to dress up as Santa. Thanks for watching. If you like the stories, remember to subscribe and activate the notification bell so you don't miss any other true disturbing stories. See you next video.